see his struggle moving to a whole different level. Before we move to the question and answer session, I will invite Mr. DelValle. Am I correct?
That's it, yes, DelValle.
Thank you, sir. Please hop over and
Thank you.
speak to us.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, my name is W. Bruce DelValle, and I'm with the law firm of Fein and DelValle with my law partner, Bruce Fein. And it is an honor to be here. I say that a lot. I don't always mean it. Today, I really mean it. There are rare occasions in anyone's life when you have an opportunity to do something that involves justice. Hopefully, as a lawyer, I get to do that fairly often. It almost never happens to anyone. Very few are called to secure justice for an entire people, an entire nation. Everyone watching out there, both Ambazonians and non-Ambazonians, needs to understand there is hope. There is something you can do. There are things that will be done, and there is hope. And at the end of the tunnel, independence will be secured. Of that I'm confident. Because why? Because it is right. Ambazonians in this room, Ambazonians watching, Ambazonians worldwide, all they want is very simple. They want what they had. They want independence. They want freedom. Seldom in the world does a nation that is free, a place that is free, that is granted its independence, just get taken. Stolen like a thief in the night steals a baby, and no one does anything. That's what happened here. This hope comes from the past, from the present, and the future. And I want to look a little bit at the past because I think most people don't really understand what I'm talking about when I say all you really want is what you had. And when I look at the past, and when we look at the past, one of the problems with looking at the past is you point your finger, you indict someone, you make them feel guilty. And sometimes that's not the way to get people to do what you want them to do. And make no mistake about it. When someone asks me what I do for a living, I say, I try to get people to do things they don't want to do. Jurors don't want to be there generally. Judges, it's their job, but they don't want to choose my side. We're trying to get Biya and Macron, Cameroon, and France to do something they don't want to do. And how do you do that? Well, if you're lucky enough to have the power of truth, the power of justice, the power of God, and the power of a belief in something that's greater than all of us, then you have truly a powerful weapon to achieve your ends. And so if we look back in the past, we're pointing a finger. And I submit to you, we're pointing a finger of the wrongs that have been occasioned to the people of Ambazonia. But we're also pointing a finger toward the future. Ambazonia, indeed Cameroon as it exists today, is a house built on sand. And as Matthew pointed out, the parables of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew from the Sermon on the Mount, a house built on sand cannot stand. How great will be the fall. I'm not sure everyone knows, so I'm going to go into something that all of you know, that Ambazonia was also known as Southern Cameroon. It is currently the English-speaking section of the predominantly French-speaking Cameroons. The population is home between 6 to 8 million people. I think the Biya government wants everyone to believe there's only 6 million people so they can make sure 2 million people don't get to vote. Not that voting matters anyway. So it's 25% of the population of the present-day Republic of Cameroon. Yet more than 60% of the GDP of the Republic of Cameroon comes from Ambazonia. Therein hangs the tale. The wealth of the Cameroons is in Ambazonia. Not just in the oil, the timber, the minerals, but in the people. The hardworking, the industrious people of Ambazonia. This is not a situation where, like South Sudan, where There's an effort to gain freedom for a group of people that simply can't support themselves or have no ability to govern themselves. Ambazonians have been governing themselves for hundreds of years. They had perhaps the first democratic election in Africa. Transition of power through a democracy. They had a written constitution many years ago, centuries ago. So initially, the United Nations, they sanctioned the creation of two states of equal status in Cameroon. What was known as Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia, and the French-speaking Cameroon. Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia speaks English. The Republic of Cameroon speaks French. French Cameroon gained its independence from France. Some would suggest it's never really been independent from France. France has this remarkable thing it does with its colonies. It says you're free, but come here, I want to hug you. And they hug them so closely, they almost die. They control the money, they control the trade. They make sure the French military is always garrisoned there. So that was January 1st, 1960. And the British Trusteeship Territory of the Southern Cameroons was created on the 1st of October in 1961. And immediately, and herein lies the tale of the illegitimacy of Cameroon. The people of Ambazonia, of Southern Cameroons, were given a choice. They were given two choices. Do you want to be part of Nigeria, or do you want to be part of Cameroon? And the people of Ambazonia, Southern Cameroon, go, wait, what about this other thing? Us being independent, because we're independent. We're our own deal. Well, that was never really offered to them by the UN, and there's a lot of reasons that aren't really clearly explained, but mostly because the British ambassador didn't think it was such a good idea. That was a bad idea. So what happened was they were forcibly annexed into French Cameroon in 1961. But they had their own prime minister. The Ambazonians had their own prime minister. They had their own government. They even had their own star on the flag of Cameroons. There were two stars. Now, good luck finding that flag, because something's happened to that flag. There's now one star. So it was two nations coming together to form one country, reluctantly. So after this forcible annexation, beginning in 1971, 1972, the French-speaking government of the Federal Republic of the Cameroons, unilaterally, they abolished the Federation. There was this wonderful constitution that was created in 61. It shared power. Territorially, there was a sharing of power. There was Southern Cameroons, there was Ambazonia, and then there was French-speaking Cameroons. There was English-speaking Cameroon, French Cameroon. They shared power. Institutionally, they shared power in the executive, in the judiciary, and in the legislature. And the executive power was shared by the president and each of the state prime ministers. And the legislative power was shared by the state deputies and the federal deputies. There was always a guarantee for security. They were able to conduct themselves as two nations. And in the Constitution, it became known as the Fein Accord. They arrived at a complete accord, and it was remarkable at the time for the world, and certainly remarkable for Africa. It was a written constitution that shared power and seemed to be fair. They even went so far as to change their identities. French-speaking Cameroon became East Cameroon. English-speaking Ambazonia, Southern Cameroon, became West Cameroon. Once again, you can find old globes and old maps that show you this. It's the nation of West Cameroon, the nation of East Cameroon. Good luck finding those, because they've been abolished. They've been wiped off the face of the earth. The Constitution had a very interesting provision in Section 47, and that was very clear that if you wanted to amend the Constitution of these two nations together, you had to have a majority. There were 5 votes for West Cameroon, English-speaking, Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia, and there were 5 votes for the French-speaking. The only way the Constitution could ever be amended was if everyone agreed to it. Something happened in 1971. There was a referendum well, actually the referendum of 20th of May of 1972, that essentially abolished the Constitution, abolished the fundamental basis that the UN approved, the creation of this joining of two nations, the freedom and independence, was abolished unilaterally. There was no vote. Parliament never voted on it. There was a proclamation was issued. It was DF 72-270. It abrogated the original Constitution in whole cloth. It abrogated the accord, the very essence of the agreement of how these two nations came together. And it imposed a secret unilateral constitution. And that secret unilateral constitution said, we're ending the government, and it was a gentleman by the name of Hijo, the first dictator. And he says, I'm in charge. It's my government. It's a military junta. There will be no parliament. There will be no courts, unless I say so, for 1 year. And then we're going to form a new government. And there's only going to be one Cameroon. And it's not hard to figure out what happened next. The majority, 75 to 80% of the people that spoke French became Cameroon. And the people that spoke English in Ambazonia became a colony. And I don't use that word lightly. Mr. Bowe and I had an exchange of emails where I said, well, I kind of object to that a little bit. I'm not sure you can say they're a colony, but the more you look into the definition of a colony, it's where one nation occupies another nation for their own purposes and subjugates them as though they were slaves. And that's what happened to South Cameroon. That's what happened to Ambazonia. They became the slaves. They became the colony. All of the powers were put in the hands of the president. All of it. The president, now Biya. He gets to be the federal government. He gets to choose the leaders of the state government. He gets to choose the leaders of the local government. He gets to decide, even after elections, who wins. He gets to decide who the ministers are. He gets to decide who the speaker is. He gets to decide how the legislature is composed. And elections have become just a mere ritual. So what I want people out there to start understanding is this just isn't right. This is wrong. And that's why you should help, because we're correcting a wrong. And the wrong just keeps getting worse. It just keeps getting worse. What we had was a revolution. It was a coup d'etat. It was a coup d'etat by the presidency. Biya became president through a coup d'etat. He destroyed a constitutional government and created a dictatorship. Right under everyone's noses. French didn't say a word. Sadly, the English didn't say a word. Now, there was a lot going on in 1971 and 72 throughout Africa. There were wars in Egypt, there were wars in Israel, there was war in Vietnam. But no one said a thing. Everyone stood silent. That's what you can't do. You can't be silent. The time for silence is past. So today's government, today's institution, today's system, all comes from this junta, this coup d'etat, this overthrow, this military type takeover from a beautiful, imperfect, but still constitutional government, the rarest of things in Africa. So anyone that says, and I know they're going to say it, oh, well, the Ambazonians, they're not capable of governing themselves. They don't know what to do. It'll just be another southern Sudan, another South Sudan. They're wrong. The people of Ambazonia know what a constitution is. They know what it means to govern themselves. They know what justice means. They know the importance of justice. They know the importance of independence and liberty. Because that's what they're asking for now. And they're not asking for it just to get what they want, to scurry along and create another despotic regime. I firmly believe that everyone in this room, everyone sitting at this table, and everyone out there is committed to making Ambazonia the shining star of Africa, fulfilling the promise that has never been fulfilled of the post-colonial Africa, the promise of Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and the other great leaders. It can be done, and we're going to do it. So you ask yourself, how is it possible that all of this could have happened and no one has recognized that Ambazonia is free and independent, that it's a thing, that it exists? Well, they have. They are, the junta of Biya and his predecessor has gone from one illegality to another, one illegitimacy to another. Keep putting on additions and building higher on that house of sand that Jesus tells us through Matthew. Cannot stand. It's now being governed as a colony because it has never been legitimately annexed. It is not legitimately absorbed. And I submit to you that Cameroon, as it exists today, isn't a legitimate nation. President Biya in 1992 himself acknowledged Ambazonia's existence. In a case, it was the Bamenda High Court case HCB 28/92. He agreed. Additionally, President Biya, some of you may remember, it's funny how these conflicts come and go. A huge thing in the mid-early 2000s, the Bokassa conflict with Nigeria. Well, actually, it was in the early 90s with Sonny Abacha, who isn't getting a lot of good press these days. But when that conflict with Nigeria was resolved, Paul Biya signed a treaty, a UN treaty, in front of God and everybody, in the UN, that said the following. Let me quote. I, President Paul Biya of the Republic of Cameroon, in a bid to provide lasting peace to the Bokassa conflict, do hereby commit myself and my government to respect the territorial boundaries of my country as obtained at its independence. Cameroon's independence was obtained January 1st, 1960. Ambazonia wasn't a part of Cameroon January 1st, 1960. Ambazonia was still part of Nigeria for a few months and then free. So Paul Biya promised in a treaty, and this is important, I'm going to pull back to where I should be, where my country could be. Because he is French, so clearly he says, l'état c'est moi. The state is me. Paul Biya is Cameroon. Cameroon is Paul Biya. I'm going to pull back, and this is where we're going to be. And the UN believed him because they sent surveyors out and they built these giant pillars that are on the border between Ambazonia and French-speaking Cameroon. So if for a moment you think that there's no legitimacy to this claim, there's a fence. Pretty close to a fence anyway. There's a wall separating Ambazonia, the free and independent nation of Ambazonia, from French Cameroon. And I found out something today, speaking with His Excellency the President. I find this stunning, and I hope people that are listening and watching today think about what I'm about to say, the gravity of this. If you live in Ambazonia, if you're an English-speaking resident of Ambazonia, and you cross the Mungo River, if you cross into French Cameroon, you have to go through a security checkpoint. You have to present documents, and you have to pay customs on anything you bring back or take in. Just like if you're in Italy and you're crossing over to Switzerland. Just like you're in France and you're crossing into Portugal. It's not one country. They don't think for a minute it's one country. They know better. They're just not acting better because they have themselves a nice colony. And that cannot stand. That house of sand cannot stand, and how great will be that fall. Further, this may be a little unfair, but that's what lawyers do. We bring up unfair stuff. There's a really good chance Paul Biya isn't even legitimately the president of Cameroon. Under any international accords, any concept of international law, because what the Cameroonian Constitution says, that the National Assembly president becomes the head of state until the president is elected within 90 days. So when Ahidjo resigned, what should have happened was the head of the National Assembly, president of the National Assembly, should have become the president of Cameroon. Unfortunately, he was Ambazonian. His name was St. Muna. He should have been the president of Cameroon, and then there should have been an election. If anything happens when you have slaves or a colony, you don't let them lead you. So Biya appointed himself president, illegitimately. Illegitimately. How great was its fall when the house of sand, the house built on sand, came down. So you see, there is no basis for any argument against Ambazonia. You have to tell the truth if you're Cameroonian, or if you're on the side of the French-speaking Cameroonians. If you're Macron, before you go to bed at night, when he's not busy telling us how many plastic bottles we should use and standing on tables and cheering on soccer teams, he has to tell himself the truth. And the truth is, Ambazonia is the vassal state, the colony, the slave of Cameroon and of France. They're still a colony in West Africa. He has to tell himself that truth, because no other truth will abide, because there is no other truth. Everything else is a lie, and it's been a lie every day for decades. That's the hope. How great will be the fall. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. It's deeply unfortunate. What I just told you, the history of the illegitimacy of this whole process, would be enough for independence. But there's an even greater thing that has happened. There's even more of a reason that everyone out there needs to join together for justice, for liberty, for independence, freedom, equality, and humanity. Now, Biya has embarked on a course of genocide, mass slaughter of innocents. He's not slaughtering his people. He's slaughtering civilians in a country that he has taken over. And they tend to be children. They tend to be beautiful children. And they tend to be women and young men. And they're all civilians because there's not an Ambazonian army. And there's this tendency, and I don't want to get too horrific or explicit here, but one of the powerful messages he sends to those that he's enslaved and colonized, the favored way of the militias, the security forces, and the military. And that's an amazing word, isn't it? Militia. That means anything. Anybody that you can pay to kill somebody, they're in a militia. And then you say it really wasn't me. And Biya says, oh, it's really Ambazonians killing Ambazonians. And that's nonsense. But one of the favored ways, the horror-filled ways, one of the reasons I can't let my children look at my computer when I'm working on these files is because of how they see, is they like to wound the Ambazonian children and women and then burn them to death while they're still alive. And they burn their homes. There's been over 400 villages razed, leveled by fire. Or they do it in the streets. And why do they do it that way? And why do I say it's a favored tactic, not just an accident? Because they're sending a message. You shoot someone in the night, or you shoot someone in the forest 200 feet away, no one really sees that unless they're standing with you or with the person that got killed. But if there are villages being burned and the horrible screams of people being burned alive, that gets heard, that gets seen, and the message is sent. And the message is very clear. The message is, your God isn't here to help you. I command you. I am the demon, the devil that can destroy you and will. Don't rise up against me. That is the message that Paul Biya is sending. And that is the message that I hope when President Macron, before he goes to bed at night, stops telling us how many plastic bottles to drink from, stops standing on tables rooting for his soccer team, who were primarily from Africa, but that's another story. I hope he understands that that's the real message that he's sending. It's not about plastic bottles or soccer teams. It's about children being burned to death just to preserve an illegitimate colony that should have never existed. There are over 2 million people that have been displaced. Many of them have crossed over and gone into Nigeria, which has its own problems. It's not exactly a great place to flee to. Things must be pretty bad if you look to Nigeria as a place where you can find peace and comfort and respite. And under the international law, as Mr. Fein said, it's both the right and the duty of the people to throw off a government that is seeking to reduce them to absolute despotism, seeking to reduce them to slavery and to being a colony. And that politically defenseless minorities can escape oppression. And we have more than that here. It's not a minority, it's a separate nation that has been oppressed and enslaved. They've been murderously denied their internationally mandated rights. And if I haven't lost you with the horrible nature of the things I'm telling you, I hope you're still here, because something can be done. We all need to do something. And just like when you go to church, just like Jesus said also on the Sermon on the Mount, good Lord, would my grandma be proud of me to know that I mentioned the Bible twice, 3 times today. You can give 3 things: your time, your talent, and your treasure. But you can't stand by. You can't stand by and just watch it happen and do nothing. That's not an option. We're talking about civilization. Mr. Fein mentioned the various avenues of redress, and I submit one that's very interesting to me. Not only the ICC, who we've appeared in front of, we have the fortune of one of the security guys there is from Florida like me, and the last time we were at the ICC, he goes, "Hey, you're that Florida guy, how are you doing?" I said, "You know, while it's good to be recognized by you, I'm not sure this is the best place to be recognized." He said, "Don't worry, the bad guys don't come through security." So it was a good deal. But the International Court of Justice, not really used that often. It's where nations get to sue nations based upon violations of treaties, accords, and promises. And I submit to you that I think we have 2 pretty darn good cases, maybe more, of the violation of the international accord, the Fein Accord, the violation of the Constitution, the initial Fein Constitution. That was an agreement that we're going to do this, we're going to do that. That was totally abrogated in 1972. And also the Bokassa Treaty, once again. Biya probably didn't know what he was doing, but he promised in front of the UN, in front of God and everybody, I'm pulling back Cameroon to where it was January 1st, 1960. That's the other side of the Mungo River. It doesn't include Ambazonia. So he needs to abide by that promise, and the International Court of Justice can do that. So I want to close by saying, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Fangam Gorji Dinka. I'm proud he's a lawyer. Not often lawyers do really good things. As I once told my grandma before she passed away, she said, "It's going to be great to see you in heaven, Brucey." And I said, "Grandma, I don't know. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to have to work extra hard. It's going to be real hard for me to get there." But he was a lawyer in his 1985 Declaration of Ambazonia Independence. Have some calling him the father of Ambazonia. And he's 93 now, I think. He's in exile. He's been arrested by Biya and tortured. He says, "I'm not the father, God is the father." But he's the guy. But sitting at this table, sitting in this room, I am confident that the James Madison, the Thomas Jefferson of Ambazonia is in this room, or sitting at this table, or certainly in that audience, outside in the audience. There's going to be a constitution. And I am equally confident that not only will these people be, or whoever this is, be the James Madison or the Thomas Jefferson of Ambazonia, of Africa, because it's time to get it right. It's time that post-colonial Africa realizes the potential that it's had. And we don't go from one despotic dictatorship to the next. That we finally, the dignity of the greatness of the African people, is recognized by their government. And I know that's going to happen in Ambazonia. Because after all you've been through, so I pointed the finger in the past, the present, and the future. After all you've been through, you can't just restart this thing again, making it just like it was back then. And that's a promise everyone has made in this room. And that's a promise to the world. This forum was intended to explore the various aspects of the Ambazonian independence movement and the optimal, non-violent path to Ambazonian independence and the termination of the ongoing genocide of the people. All of the things that we're going to do as lawyers, that we're going to do, that we need your help, are all against the backdrop of stop killing my people. Independence, work toward it every day. But for now, they got to stop killing us. They got to stop killing my people. They have to stop killing the Ambazonians. And with all grace and humility, I say you're my people. Because once you got me, you got me. I get team haircut. I'm sort of like that bulldog. I have 7 speeds in 1 gear, only 4. So that is what we had hoped to do for you today. The thing that we cannot forget, however, is this isn't located somewhere in Africa involving some people in Africa that don't have anything to do with anybody else. This is a colony. This is enslavement. France has tacitly or actually approved what is going on here. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to hopefully, not to expose all of our strategies, but one understands from reading history that France and England haven't always been good friends. One understands England's going to do something in maybe another couple of months that'll involve not funneling money into France's pet, whatever it is their pets are, how many plastic bottles you can have, or their soccer team, whatever it is Macron does when he's not thinking about this. We believe Chatham House is a key. We believe that England can step forward and get it right and do the right thing and say, that's it, enough. You French people cannot keep killing English-speaking people. You can't do that. And we hope everyone that's watching this will say the same thing. Enough's enough. You need to stop. This house built on sand cannot stand. And how great will be the fall. Thank you.